I really like rats. When I was a teenager, we had pet rats, and I would watch scary movies late at night, and the pet rat would sit on my shoulder and watch the movie with me and stick her nose in my ear and sneeze and occasionally poop, and a little pellet would fall down and I'd go throw it away. But I really like doing that. Later on, after I got married, we got pet rats, and these rats were adorable. I can see why rats are such terrible pests, because they're smart, they can get into corners, they can climb, they can eat anything you can eat. You know, I mean, they're terrific little animals. And they loved our kids. Like my little son Grant, when he could only crawl, he would crawl after the rat, and the rat would crawl in front of him, and the rat would stop and look over his shoulder, and when he got closer, would go away, making sure he was following him. And when we had our gaming night, which of course I was still playing games back then, we'd get together, and Wendy would let the rats out, and the rats would, well, when they got out, first they'd go into whatever dark, dank corner there was behind the fridge or whatever, because, you know, they're rats, they gotta go check that out. But then they'd come to where the people were, because they were social, and they'd climb up your pants leg and sit in your lap and get in the table, and then they'd interact with you, and they would steal Doritos, and they would steal Kleenexes and squirrel them away somewhere. I guess rat them away somewhere, not squirrel. And they would try to get their nose in your drinks. You had to like keep them away, because once they put their nose over a carbonated drink, that would make them sneeze. So who wants rat sneeze in their drink, right? When we moved out of the house, we found where the rats had been putting the Doritos and the Kleenex tissues, which is they had little stores behind the couch where they were like stockpiling them for like the flood or something. Anyway, I like rats a lot. Never been afraid of rats. They're adorable. They never bit. You know, a couple of times I tried to trick a rat into biting me. I would give it a grape. They love grapes. And just before it went to grab the grape with its mouth, I stick my finger in its mouth, and then it would like take the finger in its mouth, would like spit it out, and would look at me with the expression of a rat saying, "Come on, seriously?" Anyway, despite the fact that I'm not afraid of rats, I love the story, The Rats in the Walls. This is one of Lovecraft's greatest horror tales, in my opinion. And also, of all of his tales, the one in which psychology and the breakdown of the human mind play the greatest role. Now, it's often skipped over because Lovecraft uses a horrible racist name for the heroes, the protagonists, let's call him that, Pet Black Cat. Now, I'm not defending the name that was used, but let's look at it a little rationally. The name was the name of Lovecraft's cat when he was 9 years old. And there's no evidence that Lovecraft named the cat. He's 9, someone says that your cat is named this, and he used the name. I think it's kind of harsh to condemn a 9-year-old kid for using a racist word based on his background and experience. So in this case, Lovecraft was using the name of his cat as a kid to reference his childhood, not to make a racist point. Now, the word in the cat's name is the N-word, and it wasn't the nuclear hand grenade then that it is now. So it should be seen as a word that was once semi-acceptable, but I agree, today is totally forbidden. Now, I'm not defending or excusing Lovecraft's racism as an adult, but this was something for when he was a kid, and more to the point, in the story, The Rats in the Walls, there are no racist sentiments. The story is not racist. Now, I admit that the name of the cat bugs me too, and it bugged me the first time I read it when I was only 9 years old. I guess maybe I had a better upbringing than Lovecraft, which makes sense, seeing as one of his parents went insane. Anyway, I think that new editions of this story should probably rename the cat as Blackie or something, you know. If you can't handle seeing the bad word in the text, then I propose that before you read the story, get a friend, take a felt tip pen, and scratch out every place that the cat's name appears. Then it'll be safe to read. I'm serious here. Now, anyway, to reiterate this point, Lovecraft, of course, sometimes put racist sentiments in his stories. But I reiterate, Rats in the Wall doesn't have these except for the cat's name. Everyone in the story is British or American. They make some reference to Roman ancestors, but not in a racist way. So it really bothers me that this, one of Lovecraft's not racist stories, is tagged as racist, because it shouldn't be. Anyway, on to The Rats in the Walls. Now, one feature of the story is that there are probably no rats in the walls, though there might be. The cat seems to be able to sense them, and the hero can hear them, but the hero's mental stability is kind of in question, and it gets worse as the story progresses. Now, I'm going to talk about one single aspect of the story, which shows how much in depth Lovecraft researched his stories, and also it's kind of fun to see just how much effort Lovecraft put into making these and building them. Now, near the end of the story, one of the characters psychologically descends and starts speaking as ancestors from the past. He's not becoming ancestors from the past, he's channeling their personality in a sense, and it might seem like gibberish, but it's not. It's atavism. Look it up. Now, the cool thing here is that the language changes while the character generates, and so it makes a way more impressive and creepy portrayal of what's happening than some mere physical change. It's really effective. Here's the quote in this entirely. "Curse you, Thornton! I'll teach you to faint at what my family do. Sblood, thou stinker, and I'll learn you how to gust. Wold you swink me thilk wis? Magna mater! Magna mater! Atis diade." I don't know how to pronounce the next part. I down. Agus bandua ort. Donas dolus ort. Agus letsa. Okay. It might look like nonsense, but it's not. Lovecraft himself said that bit of gibberish that follows the Latin is not pithecanthropoid. The first actual ape cry is the ungle. So what is the other stuff? And what's he saying? We're going to examine it bit by bit. So first, "Curse you, Thornton, I'll teach you to faint at what my family do." So this is interesting because it's clearly old-fashioned English. But the hero is a retired businessman from Massachusetts. He's born in Virginia. He doesn't know anything about history, in particular English history. So the guy saying this couldn't have said or thought of anything like this. I will just add that the character Thornton, who's mentioned in this, is a psychic investigator in the story. So the hero is not just channeling a past event. He is channeling the personality of a past person into the present and seeing something relevant to the situation. Next. "Sblood, thou stinker, and I'll learn you how to goose." Now we're getting further back in time. Now this is Elizabethan language dating back to about 1600. Now in the tale, the Delaporte family, which our hero descends from, leave England during the reign of James I, the King James Bible James. So this would probably been about that time. Now King James died in 1625, so that's the latest the Delaportes could have left. Probably not on the Mayflower, because the Delaportes are clearly not Puritans, maybe a subsequent ship. Incidentally, I have two ancestors on the Mayflower, and they weren't related. One was a baby, one was adult. Anyway, so I guess I could be a daughter of the American Revolution, except, for the obvious problems with being a daughter. But anyway, my ancestors in America go back a long time. Anyway, let's examine this phrase. There's 3 words you might not understand, and which I had to look up. Sblood. So, Sblood is an abbreviation for God's blood, which is just an oath. It's like saying damn or hell or fuck. He's cussing out the guy. Stinkered. Now, stinkered's kind of obvious, but there's a more evil undercurrent to this. You see, stinkered was usually referred to a domestic animal, like a goat or a pig. If you read the story, you'll see why this is a particularly ominous and terrifying way for him to be referring to a person. And finally, how to gust. Well, gust, or goose, I don't know how it's pronounced, was a verb which meant to enjoy or savor the flavor. Okay, this is also kind of ominous. In other words, the hero is saying, "Damn you, pig, I'll teach you to like the taste." So, now on to the next statement. Now it's getting harder to figure out. This is from Chaucer's time, the 1300s, 1400s, and Lovecraft not only used real words from that time period for this, he looked up alternate spellings that weren't always in use. He was a real scholar. He didn't get this phrase from a dictionary. Rather than go over the words one at a time, I'll just give you the translation. "Do you labor for me in such a way?" Evidently, the character talking is angry that the person he's talking to isn't doing what he wants. At this point, next step, he jumps about 1,000 years further back in time. The disease seems to be accelerating. And here, he was Magna Mater, Atis. Most people know, but maybe not everyone, that the ancient Romans didn't really believe in their main pantheon of Jupiter, Venus, Mars, and so forth. They knew those gods were bogus. They were just for politics. Heck, the whole culture of emperor worship was tongue-in-cheek. No educated Roman believed the emperor was a god. He was just some guy who had murdered the previous emperor. But like all humans, they had an instinct for religion. So what do you do if you need religion, if you want religion, but your cultural gods are obviously fake? You bring in other gods. Mystery cult, weird foreign things. One of these cults they brought in was the Magna Mater. And that was a cult that was brought to Rome from what is now Turkey. Now, the Magna Mater had lots of features But one was that it was mostly ruled by secretive female priestesses who went into inside rooms for great mysteries. Magna Mater, also known as Cybele, was a god of war and fertility, plus she had frenzied worship days in which people basically went berserk, and the new priests, not priestesses, after they worked themselves into a hysterical crazed fugue state, they would literally cut off their penis and throw it into the statue of the goddess. So, yuck. Also, animal sacrifice was a big part of Magna Mater. Anyway, this religion went away when Christianity showed up. It basically got rid of all the other secretive cults. Now, I suppose the Magna Mater probably had some good aspects to it, like most religions. It certainly had a dark side. And the mystery cult aspect makes a lot of sense for the family of the hero in Rats in the Walls. So this shows the family goes back to Roman days and is connected to a secretive cult, mystery cult of mutilation and sacrifice. Oh yeah, and Attis is the perpetually dead but never decaying castrated corpse of Cybele's lover, who is always renewed each year. So, ick. Anyway, on to the next phrase, which is tough to figure out. Now, I'm not going to try to pronounce this, but what Lovecraft said about these words is, what the jargon is perfectly good Celtic, a bit of venomously vituperative phraseology. Now, in this case, instead of consulting a professor to get a Celtic phrase, Lovecraft did find a ready-made one so apt that he lifted it bodily from a story called The Sin Eater by Fiona MacLeod in her book Best Psychic Stories. Anyway, the only objection to this phrase is that it's actually Gaelic instead of Cymric, and they're in the south of England, so it should be Cymric, but details don't count. Nobody will ever stop to count the difference. This is Lovecraft talking. Now, Lovecraft was wrong that nobody would notice. Robert E. Howard noticed, and he thought that Lovecraft had some kind of theory about Scots migrating from England, so he wrote to Lovecraft about it, and then Lovecraft and Howard corresponded with each other until Howard committed suicide. Please note that this was a rare thing by Lovecraft to use something that he thought might have been wrong. In other words, Gaelic Scottish instead of Cymric Welsh. Probably because Lovecraft didn't have access to a Welsh language primer. On the other hand, we could claim that the heroes of the story came from Scotland originally, settling in South England in the same way that later they fled England for Virginia. It's not an unreasonable explanation. Of course, it's not Lovecraft's explanation, just mine. Now, Gaelic hasn't changed that much in the last 1,000 years. But even so, Lovecraft used old-fashioned words even for Gaelic. He also blurred the speech between Irish and Gaelic, indicating that he was intending these words to come from a time when Irish and Gaelic were the same language, which was true at one time. So this first part here, now we're going to put the translation. So, God against thee and in thy face, may a woeful death be yours, evil and sorrow to thee and thine. So this is a pretty emphatic curse. He is furious at the guy he's cursing. The word lietza is particularly adds a powerful emphasis. So I wouldn't want this curse on me. And now the last bit, ungul. So this part is ape language as imagined by Lovecraft, showing how far back the character's mind has devolved. Now this part we can't translate it because it's supposedly pretty human. But what I've shown is that Lovecraft, for the sake of one single section in the story, performed yeoman work in researching and utilizing ancient lore and fact to give his story a terrifying and creepy trend. I really look forward to someone someday changing that damn cat name and making a movie of this terrifying tale. The most impressive part of the tale to me is that there's nothing really the hero can do to avoid his fate. It's his own bloodline that's calling to him. Centuries, millennia really, of ancestors saying, this is what we are. How do you fight that? Now, this is a topic to which Lovecraft returned in the case of Charles Dexter Ward. Though at that time, it's also mixed in with a spell. Anyway, if you want a really great story about cannibalism carried to its logical extreme conclusion, read The Rats in the Walls. Also, like me, subscribe to me, consider notifications, and you can buy my stuff. For example, this thing on sale right now on my website at petersengames.com. Thanks! One day, Madeline was sitting on the porch, and her cousin Eva came by and saw her there playing checkers with her pet chicken. And Eva said, "You're playing checkers with the chicken?" And Madeline said, yep. And Eva said, that is a really smart chicken. Madeline said, she's not so great. I've beat her 4 to the Fast 5 games.